This video is going to show you exactly how to know if a woman is going to be a good match for you in the long term or is just going to act nice and take care of your stuff in the future. I'm going to show you very quickly under the hood of a woman's heart and mind and help you determine whether or not she's going to leave you heartbroken and with an empty wallet, or she's going to inspire and uplift you and ultimately help you become a better man. Most men are only ever thinking with their other head and seldom stop to think about the quality and the character of the woman they're talking to. Most men just care if a woman's hot and they'll ask questions a little later. But here's the thing, if you get really good at listening and asking the right questions, the woman that you're courting right now will very quickly show you, right to your face sometimes, if she's a good dating partner or not. The dictionary definition of discern is to perceive by the sight or some other sense or by the intellect, see, recognize, or apprehend. When somebody gets really sharp in their discernment, it will really help them a lot in the future, especially when it comes to who they open themselves up to. Just as a practical example, my first long-term relationship, which ended in her cheating on me with multiple men and then laughing in my face, could have easily been avoided if I had just listened to the conversations that we were having very early on in our relationship. I recall her expressing to me some of her concerns that she had around the practicality of having a long-term monogamous relationship, and she had told me that she was a little bit worried that that could be boring in the future. Now, if I was listening and I had my discernment ears up, I would have known that that could have probably been a really red flag to listen to, but I wasn't listening, and that resulted in a really big heartbreak for me. And look, I'm telling you this right now because I don't want this to happen to you. I don't want you to feel pain. I don't want you to have your heart broken. It's terrible. And you can learn a lot of these things by not actually having to go through the painful process. You can learn from other people's pain. And after many, many years of trial and error, I think that I've come down to the essential oils of what I would determine is good discernment. Now, I'm very serious when I say this. If you have no experience when it comes to discernment, or you don't even know what that word means, or you don't value being discerning, I guarantee you that at some point in your life, you will get harmed and hurt in some way, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a business partnership, or some kind of transaction that you have. If you don't have some sense of discernment, you will get hurt. I don't want you to be one of these guys where a woman just drags you through the court system and takes half your stuff. That stuff takes years to overcome. And sometimes people never financially recover from it or emotionally recover from it. And by taking this advice and actually applying it in your life, you will save yourself a lot of headache and a lot of troubles, I promise you. And I know personally that these principles work very, very well because there have been many times where I've applied these principles and I've saved myself from getting into a really bad relationship with a woman that I found out many years later that she was consistently reckless and unfaithful to her previous partners. And the cool thing about these discernment factors is that they don't just have to do with relationships. They can do with partnerships, they can do with friendships, anything that has to do with some sort of collaboration together where you're emotionally and mentally and sometimes physically investing time into one another. These principles work the same with whatever kind of relationship, romantic or platonic. And just as a testament to that, a number of years ago, I was talking to somebody that I was considering getting into business with, and I used some of these tactics to determine the quality and the character of this person. And I kind of got a gut feeling that I wouldn't really want to trust this person and really wouldn't be a good person to work with. And I came to find out many years later that he actually was very irresponsible when it came to money, and he was not a good person to work with in the business. And the business that he was trying to get into eventually fell apart because of his mismanagement and his inability to make good business decisions. So like I've said, these principles have continually saved my butt from pretty painful experiences. And if you listen to them, you will save yourself a lot of painful experiences too. So if we can break down these three different aspects of this discernment process, I would say that they are as follows. 1, it's the questions that you ask them. 2, it's the responses that they give you. And 3, it's how you feel when they give you those responses. The way that people respond is ultimately going to be the strongest determining factor of the answers that you're trying to get. Your body has this very interesting kind of discernment mechanism where it's going to tell you if you're safe or not with that person. This is where we get the expression, a gut feeling from. You really need to listen to what your body's telling you because it has a much higher intelligence than you give it credit for. Now, there's a real art to this process. It takes time to get used to. It can be a little clunky at first, and if you don't really do it well, it can feel like you're interrogating them or putting them on the spot. So generally what I like to do when I'm trying to determine the quality and the character of a person is I will just ask them particular questions, maybe in a playful manner, or maybe I'll put it into a story, or maybe I will ask them to give me a specific situation or scenario where they responded to something, and then based on their response to that situation, I'll determine the character that they have based on the response of those situations. So I'm not directly asking them questions to get answers. I'm kind of asking them to give me the answers, but in sort of a roundabout way, which doesn't alarm them to make them think that I'm trying to get something out of them, but it also kind of gives me enough information to determine the quality and the character of the person I'm talking to. So by learning to ask the right questions in the right way, and by learning to steer the conversations in a way that helps you get those answers, you can very easily get the right information that you want to learn from those people without alarming them into thinking that you got something up your sleeve, or without making them feel like they're on the spot. Remember, this is not to manipulate them. I'm not encouraging you to manipulate people at all. This is just a way to get to know somebody so that you can protect yourself and ultimately be respectful to the other person. You don't want them to feel uncomfortable, of course. You don't want them to feel like they're being interrogated by the FBI. You just want to get a little bit of information, enough to allow your body to feel into their answers, enough to give you a little bit of information so that you can use your internal mechanism as a guidance system to ask yourself, how do I feel about the answers that this person is giving me? So I've codified what I call the 12 core frameworks of discernment. And what these 12 core frameworks of discernment are, is they are categories of questions that will determine specific aspects of the characters of the person that you're talking to. And they can determine whether they have good values, whether they have good relationships with people, what their relationships are to money, what their relationships are to their emotions, what their relationships are to their visions. So every one of these questions is going to be able to give you a good sense of the character of the person, their future, and what views and visions they have for the future, as well as the way that they've behaved in the past. So the number one most important set of questions that I always ask for any type of relationship, whether it's a romantic or a platonic relationship, is what I call the core value questions. And essentially the core value questions are getting you to very quickly determine the values that a person has to see if they align with your values. Sometimes I'll just flat out ask somebody, what are your core values? If they don't know what a value is, then maybe you probably don't want to be talking to that person. But a lot of the times, people won't really think too deeply into their values. Now you'll know if somebody gives you a good response and says, you know, I've thought about it and these are my core values, and they're on the money and they say exactly what it is and they live by it. That's probably a really, really good indicator that somebody has a very lucid and clear mind and thinks deeply into the person that they want to be and the person that they want to show up as every single day. Now you could meet somebody that is very clear on what their values are and demonstrates it in their behavior. However, those values might not align with your values. So when they say their values, you have to be able to ask yourself, can I compromise on my values or myself to be able to be with this person? Now, compromise is not always bad, but sometimes if you have core structural values that need to be changed or thrown out, I generally would not recommend you being with that kind of person if the way that they think will completely conflict with the way that you think. And then the last part of this is very simple. You just watch to see if they do what they say that they're going to do. If they tell you that they have a specific set of values and that their actions are not aligned with the way in which they say that they're going to be, then this is going to be a clear indicator that either they're lying to themselves deliberately or unconsciously. And you don't want somebody that's out of integrity with themselves, because that's just going to cause you a lot of problems in the future. So the next core framework of the discernment process is what I call habit listening. And habit listening is basically asking sets of questions or more listening to the way in which they respond or behave to particular things. So for example, I'm watching for bad mental or behavioral patterns. Do they gossip? Do they smoke? Do they get angry? Are they reactionary? Are they vindictive? Are they essentially any one of these negative characteristics? I see if there's a particular pattern that arises. And sometimes they'll even tell you, like, I'm a jealous person. I'm an angry person. I have a short temper. And they're going to tell you, if they're going to tell you, you should listen to them, okay? Because they're just straight up telling you, hey, I'm this kind of person, and that's it. And no matter what you do, no matter what you say, I'm not going to change. And the kind of people that think like that are often very entitled and will often be very, very difficult to cope with and deal with in the future. So pay attention to the way in which they behave. If they have specific patterns or habits that they do which demonstrate some kind of bad behavior or bad emotional reaction to inconveniences in their life or difficult times in their life. Because relationships require you to make sacrifices. Relationships will require you to do difficult things together. And if they have a tendency to be vindictive or angry or jealous, I guarantee you that emotion is going to show up at some point in your relationship in the future. So you might as well just nip it in the bud before it even happens. Other things I pay attention to, which could be a little more subtle, are neurosis, if they are neurotic, if they feed off of drama, if they start gossiping. That's essentially another big thing that I look for. If they immediately start gossiping about some woman or some man or whatever, huge, huge, huge red flag. If anybody's gossiping about anybody, that's just nobody that you want to have in your life, honestly. So in terms of habits, another big thing that I look for is I want to see if they take initiative. If you're going to want to get into a long-term relationship with somebody, all the projects that you're going to do, all the major life decisions that you're going to do, all the people that you need to take care of, maybe children, maybe your spouse, maybe your parents, maybe your spouse's parents, all of that takes some kind of initiative. And if she is not willing to take that kind of initiative to do difficult things, that's another huge red flag. And lastly, in regards to this habit listening category, I would say that it's very, very important to listen to how she talks about other people and how other people talk about her. You can tell very quickly if somebody has a good heart, has good character, if they hold their tongue when it comes to talking negatively about other people. It's pretty obvious, actually. And there's people in my life that I'm not necessarily fond of, but I'm not going to go and talk about those kinds of people, especially to people that I'm just meeting. I don't want them to think that I have ill intent for other people, because I really don't. And it's going to demonstrate to them that I do have ill intent if I start gossiping the second that I meet them. And the same goes with them. If they start gossiping about other people and you guys get into a relationship together, she's probably going to start gossiping about you. And the last thing you want is to have your reputation ruined by your woman that should be bolstering you, that should be supporting you, and that should have your back no matter what. So really, really watch out for people that gossip. Really watch out for people that talk negatively about other people, because they will talk negatively about you. The third framework of questions that I work with when it comes to discernment is what I call complementary behaviors and skills. And essentially, this framework of questions sees if what they've been working on in their life, what skills they've cultivated, and what types of behaviors and ways that they approach life would be complementary to my own way of looking at life. So for example, I make a lot of videos. I work with people online. Maybe the woman that I could be dating is really good at video editing, or maybe she loves video editing, or maybe she loves marketing, or maybe she works with women as well, and we could work together while she works with women and I work with men. So that's just an example for myself. There's plenty of other examples that could be for you with your own career of what you're doing. And there's plenty of ways in which the woman that you're going to be dating could be complementary to what you're doing. Because what this could do is this could allow you to build something together, which is very exciting because that really, really adds an element of strengthening and bonding together when you are building something that you're very proud of with your partner. And this is a very easy way to figure this out. You can ask them, what skills have they developed? What do they like to do with their free time? How do you provide value for other people? What kind of creative endeavors do you get into? And you can very quickly figure out what she likes to do and if it would be beneficial to you. And if she's open to working with other people. Sometimes people are pretty independent in what they do. But if she expresses a desire to be collaborative or work with other people in an exciting vision, that could be an opportunity for you to build something very beautiful with your woman in the future. So the fourth core framework that I work with the discernment process is what I call passion reading. And this is a little bit similar to the third core framework of what I work with. But passion reading basically is seeing how much of a zest they have for life. You don't want to be with somebody that is a Debbie Downer. You don't want to be with somebody that has a glass half empty kind of look on life. So you want to really be with a person that is optimistic about the future, especially optimistic about a future with you. And if she already has sort of a downer way of looking at life, that might be somebody that you'll have to emotionally carry in the future. And that could be a real headache for you in the future. So see if she's generally passionate about life. Is she passionate about the projects that she's working on? Is she passionate about the things that she's creating? This is going to be very, very enlivening for you sometimes when the going gets tough. If she has a generally positive outlook on life, this is going to be tremendously beneficial for you and invigorating for you in the future during your long-term relationship with her. The fifth core framework of what I use with the discernment process is what I call future-pacing questions. So essentially, these future-pacing questions are seeing if she has a depth of vision, seeing if she has a vision for how she wants to be in the future. A lot of people are very, very short-sighted, or worse, are thinking about all the stuff that they wish they did in the past, and they're not paying attention to who they're going to become in the future. So one of the biggest things that I like to focus on is what is their depth of vision for the future? And not only their depth of vision for the future, but what kinds of actions and steps they're taking to make that dream vision in the future happen. And one very easy way to do this is simply just to recognize if they're taking daily habits and actions every day to get what they want. Are they exercising every day? Are they making goals every day? Are they meeting their goals every day? Are they staying accountable to themselves? Are they staying inspired to keep up with what they're doing? This is all very, very strong indicators that this is going to be a very good person. So another set of questions within this framework that a lot of people don't consider is if they would be open to picturing a future with a partner. A lot of the times, especially with very ambitious women, they'll think about what they're doing. What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I creating? What am I making? And it will be inconvenient or out of their mind to not think about including another person. I know I myself sometimes think about this. I'm always thinking about the videos I want to make or the way in which I want to serve my clients that I already have. And sometimes I don't think about, hey, how would my life look differently if I have a partner in that? What could we do together? What could the challenges present themselves as? So if she's already considering a potential partner in the future, she's going to be future pacing those questions of, well, I'd be building this with my partner, or I would be going to do this with my partner, or I would be making this happen with my partner. And if her future vision isn't incorporating some other kind of person, then she's probably not going to be considering you, right? So you want to make sure that the way that she talks about her future is including another person. And you also want to find out, furthermore, if she'd be willing to compromise with her partner in the future. So a very practical way to figure this out is you can ask her, has there been a time where you've had to compromise in the past that was difficult for you? And what is considering compromising to you? Can you compromise at all? Is that within your vocabulary? Something to that effect. It doesn't have to be that pointed, but it can be intermingled throughout your conversation in regards to her future pacing vision. And in regards to the future pacing vision, this isn't necessarily future pacing vision, but it indicates the future. I ask myself, am I impressed with this kind of person that I'm talking to based on her age and her experiences? So a very good example could be, let's say you start dating somebody that you meet from a third world developing country, and they make it a point to go to the library, and they don't have any electricity. And so they read books by the candlelight, or they make sure that they go to the university and they hang out with the professors because they understand that education is power. I mean, that's just a very extreme example. You're probably not going to be dating a person that's like that or has had that background, but just to paint an extreme example as a picture, are they actually doing something or are currently embodying someone that would be considered impressive for their age range? And a lot of the times, people are just kind of going along to get along. They're not in love with their future. They're not in love with their vision. And so when I meet somebody that's really dedicated to a specific path or a way of being or a craft or an art, I sort of juxtapose their skill set or their mindset to other people their age, and I see if they're pretty mature or not. And if they're not, maybe that's not necessarily a good partner to be with, because again, you don't really want to carry this person in your relationship. You don't want to have to carry them emotionally or financially or essentially be the one that's always trying to lift them up. You want it to be an interdependent relationship. You want it to have a synergistic way of being and not having one always carrying the other person. So the 6th core framework that I work with is what I call recognizing the healing process. Now, anybody that's done any kind of inner work on themselves realizes that ultimately the reason why you don't have essentially what you want in your life or are not happy with the way that you are now is because there's some kind of blockage that you have in your life that's keeping you from getting you what you want, whether that's a childhood wound or some trauma or some fear or some lack or some bad thing that's happened to you. Something in your brain is keeping you from getting what you want. And anybody that realizes that knows that they need to start the inner work journey. They need to start the inner healing journey. And that can be anything, really. It could be meditating, it could be journaling, it can just be self-reflection, it can be some form of healing work. It doesn't really matter what it is, but as long as they're actively participating in trying to be a better version of themselves and working on the things that they know are holding themselves back, this is a very, very strong indicator of a high-quality person, because most people are totally unconscious of the things that are holding them back. And even if they are conscious of those things, they're not actually actively taking the time to make sure that they're overcoming those blockages so that they can get what they want, right? And so based on the way that they talk about these kinds of things, it will be a very strong indicator to know if that kind of person is really on the path of being the best person that they can be. So I'll give you a very practical example. I used to date a girl that had a lot of problems with drugs. And she had problems with drugs because she was very depressed and didn't have a sense of community. She didn't have a support network, and she would turn to this very self-destructive tendencies. But she recognized the fruitlessness of these kinds of actions. And generally, one would say, okay, well, she was a former drug addict. She's probably not a person that I want to date. Now, I have a little bit of a different perspective on this because I realize what it's like to go through very, very difficult times. And I realize that if you are able to go through difficult times and transcend those difficult experiences and come into a deeper state of peace, a deeper state of enlightenment, a deeper state of self-knowledge, you are actually going to be an extremely strong, wise, and discerning person because you've gone through the fire yourself and you've came out on the other side. So before I started dating this girl long term, I was very impressed that she was very conscientious of the struggles that she went through, very conscientious as to why these things were existing, and very conscientious as to what she needed to do to overcome those challenges. And she actively took part in the healing process and the detoxification process and the psychology process and the mental processing process. And then finally was totally clean for many, many, many years, and her depression was gone. And when I met her and I saw her tell me that very candidly and very openly, that actually made me very impressed because what it showed to me was a very high level of maturity and a high willingness to learn and to become a better person, a better partner for a man or for a child or for her own family. And that was ultimately, interestingly enough, one of the reasons why I considered dating her seriously was because I've seen how far she's gone and her humility around her healing process. So the 7th core discernment factor questions that I have, which sort of ties into the healing process, and it's a little bit funny, but I call this the daddy issues response question sets. Now, you might find this funny, and everybody knows the expression, oh, girls with daddy issues are the most fun. Yeah, they might be fun, but they might not be the best partner for you in the future long term. So this is a very, very interesting kind of kill 3 birds with 1 stone kind of determining factor. Ultimately, a woman's relationship to her father is very, very much going to determine her relationship to you, because her father is representative of the masculine force, it's representative of the authority figure, it's representative of the action and the doing and the creating and the containing and the structure. And if she has a problem with that type of energy within herself, she's going to project a whole lot of problems on you in the future. Okay? So through this process, I look to listen to see how she communicates about her father. And this happens within 3 stages. And if you know what you're listening for, and you get very clear on how she talks about her father, very, very quickly are you going to determine which category she's in. So I'll give you a very practical example. Category number 1. She's got a very terrible relationship with her father, and she's still very bitter about it. She may say something to the effect of, oh my God, I can't stand my dad. He's such an asshole. He's so terrible. He never lets me do what I want to do. I just fuck him, whatever. I can't tell you how many women I've heard say something like that. Okay, that's a huge red flag, because I know that she is angry, hasn't done any type of inner work, hasn't recognized the humanity in her father at all, hasn't done any type of self-reflection on herself, and honestly doesn't even recognize the value in doing it in the first place. So good luck with that one, man. The second stage of this is that she's beginning to recognize the pain of the relationship that she's in with her father, and is taking personal responsibility for how she's dealing with her relationship with her father. So she may say something to this effect. Yeah, I don't necessarily have a really good relationship with my father, but I'm doing the best that I can to take care of myself. I'm doing the best that I can to forgive. I'm doing the best that I can to heal. I've had some very difficult situations in the past with him, but I know eventually that I can overcome those challenges, and I'm not going to let those challenges stop me from being me. That's a very encouraging sign, because a woman that talks like that recognizes that she's not a victim and that she's actually in control of her future. She's in control of how she perceives her relationships, and ultimately she's in control of the relationships that she gets into. The last and final stage, I'm sure you've guessed, is a woman that has totally healed her relationship with her father. Now, bonus points if she already has a good relationship with her father. That's great. But unfortunately, a lot of women don't necessarily have good relationships with their father, let alone with a masculine type figure. There's a lot of BS around toxic masculinity and all that stuff online, and she's probably bought into some of it, especially if she's from Western countries. But this third stage that women can go through is a healed relationship with her father, which generally involves a lot of peace and a lot of clarity and a lot of calmness around when she talks about her father or when she talks about masculine figures. So for example, she may say something to the effect of, yeah, I used to have a very bad relationship with my father, but I realized that he was just a human trying to do the best that he could with the best that he got. And if he had better ways of approaching things, he would have done that too. If he knew how to give me what I needed, he would have done that, and I've forgiven him, and I'm at peace with that, and that's okay. And if he wants to come around, great, he'll come around. But I'm okay with me, I love myself, I don't need my father's approval. As long as I'm doing the right thing and I'm in alignment and I'm in integrity with myself, I'm okay. So she doesn't have to say exactly that, but something to the effect. You'll very, very quickly tell how she feels based on how she talks. Right? So really pay attention to the way in which she talks about her father, because that's going to ultimately be a projection that she'll have onto you. So framework number 8 that I have in our discernment factors question sets is what I call the gut response. Okay? Now this is very interesting. This isn't necessarily a set of questions that one asks per se. This is more a way in which to interpret the questions and the answers that are being given to you. If she asks you specific questions that make you feel a little off, it will give you a similar response in your gut as when she's giving answers to your questions. Now, what's very interesting about the gut is a little bit mysterious, and scientists are still kind of scratching their head as to why the gut functions this way. Some scientists postulate, actually, that the reason why we feel compelled to kiss one another is actually our gut bacteria communicating with us saying, hey, I want to test to see if her bacteria is going to work well with mine. Because if you look at long-term married couples that have been living together, you actually come to find out that they eventually, over time, have the same exact gut bacteria. So your gut intelligence is asking you, okay, are you actually going to be compatible with this person? And so the gut biome in your body is not only going to kind of ask questions, but it's also going to give you responses. And those responses are what you've probably already known before. It's like that gut feeling, right? And so this is going to really, really show you very quickly about how you feel about that kind of person. And this is not some esoteric thing that's a little bit woo-woo. It's actually very, very simple. If you ask a question and you get a response, does your gut clamp down or does it open up? Do you feel like you got punched in the gut, or do you feel like you're taking a very refreshing breath? Right? That is the determining factor that your gut is giving to you. That is the determining factor that your gut is giving to you. And it's a very powerful tool to use when it comes to how you feel about the other person and discerning the other person's character. So you can play around with different questions that you ask your gut, but ultimately you want to find out by asking and inquiring your gut how you feel about this kind of person. Some of the questions that I like to ask my gut when I'm talking to somebody is, does this person make me feel safe? Does this person make me feel inspired? Does this person trigger me? Do I trust this person? You could also ask questions like, does this person make me feel uplifted? Does this person make me feel drained? Does this person make me feel balanced? All of those questions are going to prompt your gut to give you a physiological response. Really listen to that physiological response, because that physiological response is going to really, really help you in the discernment process. So number 9 in the core questions process that I like to ask is a little bit dark and devious, and this is the narcissism or Machiavellianism tendencies. Now, these are basically the dark characteristics that somebody can have. Their manipulation, their desire to control, any sense of neurosis, any type of erraticism, right? So I really try to pay attention to the way in which somebody acts when it comes to their neurosis or their narcissism. And there are plenty of videos online that you could look up for how to determine or how to spot a narcissist. There's dozens and dozens of videos. I really encourage you to take some time to listen to those videos, to have those tools in your pocket, because there's a lot of narcissists, and especially given social media, being able to display yourself to the world can really, really elevate the ego of a narcissist. And you really want to be paying attention to if the person that you're talking to has narcissistic tendencies. So a way that you can figure these things out, subtle clues that will help you figure these things out is, do you catch them looking at themselves a lot in the mirror? Do you see them judging people for minor things? Are they dismissive of other people's feelings? So when you say that you feel this way, do they roll their eyes and be dismissive? Or when somebody says that they were feeling bad about that way, are they dismissive of how they feel? So these are really, really big indicators of sociopathic tendencies or narcissistic tendencies. And these are really, really big red flags that you just don't want to get involved in at all. So please do yourself a favor. If you pick up on any of these attributes, it's probably a strong indicator of those types of narcissistic personality disorders or any kind of personality disorder. You just don't want to go there. All right, man, believe me, it's not fun. So framework number 10 for the discernment process is what I call X questions. Now, this might not be maybe appropriate for the first date, maybe the second or the third date, but generally the X questions are going to determine their relationship with their exes. Now, something that's always very much confused me about exes is that people will be so angry or they'll be so vindictive or they'll completely shut out their exes and they'll talk crap or whatever, but they really fail to realize the importance and the beauty and the significance of the romantic relationships they've had in the past. Sure, maybe it didn't work out now, but maybe what they've figured out over time is that, that was a very beautiful relationship that they had, and it was very valuable to them, and they probably learned a lot of things. And so, based on the way in which they talk about their ex, is going to really find out their level of maturity. If they say things like, oh, he was a narcissist, or, oh, he was a terrible person, or, oh, he was so controlling, then she's probably not putting herself in his shoes. Maybe she has, but probably not. And so if she's very negative about her exes, that means either she makes bad choices in partnerships, or she maybe had something to do with it as well, or maybe she just hasn't gone through enough healing herself. And so really pay attention to the way that she talks about her exes, because that's going to be a very strong indicator on her maturity level and her consciousness level as how she's interacting with other people. And in regards to her relationships, sometimes I'll study her past relationships. Maybe she'll talk about how they met, or maybe she'll say, oh, I broke up with this dude, and then I started dating this guy right after. So those are all indicative behaviors of subtle signs of somebody that's not going to be very faithful. I mean, if somebody starts dating another person that they meet right after you break up with that person, that means that they were looking for other partners as they were dating. And recently I heard this term, a psychological term called monkey branching, and you could look that up later. So figure out how your person that you're talking to has interacted with her past relationships, and because that's how she's going to treat you. So the 11th part of the frameworks that I use for discernment is what I called consciousness discernment. Now, essentially what this is the ability to determine if somebody has a high level of awareness of themselves or of other people. So a way that I can really do this is if she has the ability to contribute to meaningful discussions. Sometimes I'll have conversations with people and it'll feel like I just wind up educating them on something really interesting, or they'll ask me really dumb questions like, what's your favorite TikTok trend or something, like, please, get away from me. So one way to determine if somebody has a high level of consciousness is if they have an ability to participate in meaningful discussions, to give interesting insights, to be a fascinating person, to have a unique and independent perspective and a voice that is enriching and enlivening and fascinating and complementary to the way in which you look at life. I mean, could you imagine being in a relationship with somebody that bores you to tears, where everything that she says is not interesting or engaging or inspiring, and she's never showing you different perspectives of ways of being stronger or better or more creative? I mean, come on, that sounds terrible. Another way that I find out if this person has developed their consciousness a little bit is if they make it a point to respect themselves, and most importantly, to respect other people and myself. And the way that they do this is they say, you know, I have specific boundaries. I won't be treated this way, or I won't do these particular things to my body, or I used to let things happen like that. I used to be a people pleaser, but I'm not anymore. So that shows a level of self-awareness and a level of desire to change, to make their situations better for themselves. To me, that shows a level of maturity and consciousness for themselves. And finally, the 12th core framework that I use for the discernment process is the very simple green flags and red flags. Everybody knows what a red flag is, okay? They have a criminal record, they talk a lot of crap, they are abusive, they are substance abusers, I don't know, they do a bunch of terrible things, and they're just not somebody that you'd want to introduce to your mom. Like you just know very, very quickly if it's somebody that you want to introduce to your mom or not. And that's a red flag, and you should listen to it, man, trust me. But also green flags. You know, do you share the same flavor of music? Is she sweet? Is she kind? Is she present? Is she aware? Just green flags in general that can be kind of weird and quirky to you, or just ways in which you just know that she's a good person. She has strong morals. She has strong values. She tries to not curse. I need to get a little better at that. Just many different things that would determine that she has a good overall character. And you'll just know by the way that she talks or by the way that she carries herself. So those are all the 12 core frameworks that I use when I'm talking to somebody to get to know them a little bit better. And you can explore with these yourself. There's a lot to unpack, and perhaps maybe you can come up with other core frameworks yourself, and you can play with this yourself. Now, I'm not telling you that you need to do all these things, but I am suggesting that the more of these questions that you ask, the more of these types of conversations you get into, the clearer you will get on the quality and the character of the person that you're talking to. So a good rule of thumb generally is that you should ask maybe 4 to 6 of these types of questions, maybe pick and choose from any one of these types of categories, because that's going to give you a solid, grounded perspective as to the person that you're talking to. So in order to start getting some practice right now, I want you to take some action, and I want you to go to a local coffee shop or a place where a lot of people congregate. Essentially a place where you haven't met anybody yet. You don't know anybody. And I want you to do this process. I want you to get good at asking these particular kinds of questions and listening to your gut and feeling into what your gut is telling you about the quality and the character of that person. When you do this more and more and more, you'll start to notice particular patterns in the way that people talk about other people, the way people talk about themselves. You'll start to realize that a lot of the humans that you're talking to have pretty hardcore common frameworks that people work with. There's very, very few people that deviate from these normal frameworks of how humans interact with the world around them. Now, another reason why this is good to start with platonic relationships is sometimes when you meet a woman, you could feel really nervous, especially if you don't have a really high self-esteem about yourself. And by being conscientious as to how to maneuver these questions and these tactics could be a little bit mentally taxing for you, especially when you're trying to stay grounded and present with her. So it's a good muscle to practice to get used to having good conversations with people and just determining the way that people think or the way that people tick or the way that people operate. And remember to always be listening to your gut. Your gut is going to be your big megaphone that's going to be telling you about the way in which that person is, the character of how they are. Remember, your gut biome is inside of you, and the quality and the character of the person that you're trying to figure out is also inside of them. And through enough actions, it's going to show up outside of them by the way that they talk and by the way that they act. At the end of the day, when you get really, really good at the discernment process, you're going to save yourself a lot of time, you're going to save yourself a lot of headaches, and you're going to get really good at determining the high quality character of the women that you want to be with in your life. If you're having trouble communicating with different people in general, or you've found yourself getting into bad relationships, or you wonder how you can meet better people to network with or have romantic partnerships with, I want to encourage you to check out the link in my bio that I have. What I do is I work with men to totally transform the way that they show up in the world, to show them how to be the best version of themselves, to get them lit up about their purpose, to be living in total integrity with themselves, and how to have the best life that they can perceive in their minds. And one of the most important parts of this is your relationships. And there's no better way to totally mess up your life than to have a terrible romantic relationship and to have terrible partnerships in your life. So if this is something that's really calling you, if you're really, really fed up with meeting bad romantic partnerships, or you're tired of getting into bad business relationships with other people, or you just want to really sharpen your skills and your ability to make good decisions in your life, I really encourage you to check out the link in my bio so we can explore the possibility of helping you cultivate those skills and helping you find the relationships that you really, really want to be involved in.